Friends in Christ, Pastor Brian here. I've been thinking about the 10 Commandments lately. Now, mostly it's because our confirmation participants will be learning about them later this year, but also because the breaking of these commandments is at the root of more than a few of our problems today. Now, as we talked about on Sunday, one of the roots of dissatisfaction in our lives is comparing what we have with what somebody else has. The comparison that is the beginning of coveting tends to lead to either excessive pride, hey, look at what I've got compared to you, or it leads to dissatisfaction, hey, why don't I have something like that? Now, that latter focus pulls us from being thankful for what we do have and moves us to coveting what someone else has. It also orients us negatively towards our neighbor. I want that thing that you have. And I've also been thinking about the 8th Commandment. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Now, in his small catechism, Martin Luther explains the commandment in this way. We are to fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputations. Instead, we are to come to their defense, speak well of them, and interpret everything they do in the best possible light. Now, he goes on in his large catechism to expand that definition. False witness, he says, is everything which cannot be properly proved. Therefore, what is not manifest upon sufficient evidence, no one shall make public or declare for truth. Now, the immediacy and brevity of social media, especially platforms like the one formerly known as Twitter, TikTok, Snapchat, all of these things lend itself to hot takes without checking to see if there is sufficient evidence to support a conclusion. And our consumption of such seems to have made us lazy in following up on the facts of a situation, chasing down primary sources for ourselves. And this leads too often to lies being spread as the truth, assuming the worst of others, damaging people's lives, careers, and reputations. The recent events surrounding the death of a retired police chief, Andreas Rene Probst, in Las Vegas, illustrates this. Now, initially, authorities and police members believe Mr. Probst died as a result of a hit-and-run bike accident. He was riding the bike. And the headline in the Las Vegas Review-Journal following the incident identified it as such, and they reported about Mr. Probst using information they had in a conversation with his widow and his daughter. Now, almost 2 weeks later, the same reporter who wrote the initial story was approached by someone who had video evidence that the killing of Mr. Probst was intentional. Now, the reporter directed that video to the police. And when the police arrested and charged 2 teenagers for murder, the paper changed the headline of the original story, edited it to reflect the fact that his killing was deliberate. However, someone in the blogosphere found an electronic copy of the first article and began spreading the lie that the Las Vegas Journal-Review had deliberately characterized the murder of a retired law officer as a bike crash. And they went on to assume the paper was far left, anti-cop, anti-white, among other things. And then that narrative hit social media and exploded. Even Twitter/X owner Elon Musk retweeted this and added, an innocent man was murdered in cold blood while riding his bicycle. The killers joked about it on social media, yet where is the media outrage? Now you begin to understand the lie. That tweet had 55 million views. Now, the result of all this breaking of the 8th Commandment was an assault on the reporter in the byline. Her phone number was doxed, and the vitriol of people flooding her email and social media was beyond description. She has felt like her life and that of her parents is in danger because of a story that no one took the time to check and see if there was sufficient evidence to match the spin given to it by bloggers and social media posters. As the Review Journal executive editor Glenn Cook wrote, this all happened because the digital audience never noticed that the story that infuriated them was published almost a month ago, before the new facts ever came to light. Now, as with all of God's commands about how we are to live with one another, the 8th commandment against bearing false witness was meant to keep us in relationship with one another. It is meant to keep us from passing on gossip that creates a potentially false narrative about someone. A false narrative that then becomes almost impossible to overcome. Friends, we live in a world where information about someone can be sent throughout the globe and be seen by millions of people in seconds. And even more so than in the past, it is our responsibility to care for our fellow human beings enough to make sure that any information about them that we pass on is correct, to avoid idle speculation and conjecture. And it is also our responsibility to check the information we receive before we inform our own opinions of people, to assume the best of intentions rather than the worst of someone. And in this way, we respect the image of God that resides in them. Now, it doesn't mean that we don't ever disagree or we can't have an opinion about whether we like someone or not, or whether what they did is good or not. What it does mean is that we are careful of how we talk about them. It means we are careful consumers of media and information. It means that we obey the 8th commandment, see what others do in the best possible way for both their sake and for ours. God's blessings.